So guys, hi to everyone. Today we have lecture number 3, which we missed from the last lesson, which should be on Saturday. That's why today we want to save this lecture, but without any students. And after looking for this video, if you have any questions, you can write via the direct message to me or to your practice lesson teachers to identify and to get the answers from your questions. So let's start lecture number 3. As you know from our syllabus, we have the JavaScript part of the 3 main development languages. HTML, CSS we already done. We passed the tutorials and so on. Today we have to talk about the JavaScript. Okay. So let's start. Today we have lecture number 3. The JavaScript. What is the JavaScript? So while the web development, we know that to add some elements to our web page, we have to use the HTML tags for any purposes. So after adding your elements to on the web page, using the CSS, you can add some styles to show your elements a little bit beautiful, using that possibilities of the CSS language, adding the attributes and the values. So what is a JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level programming language which is used for the adding the dynamic, adding the actions, adding the user interaction with on the web page to while the developing of the websites. So after adding your HTML elements and adding the CSS styles to the elements, using the JavaScript, you can add some of the actions, some of the interactions, and after adding the JavaScript, your web page should be somehow dynamically changed or dynamically moved with each other. So here I have the style guide link, which is from the Airbnb. If you go here, you can see that we have different type of the rules and other guidelines. How should we do to work a perfect best practices? So under this link, you have to read till the end and try to use them while writing on JavaScript something. So I have here so many topics, so many titles that we have to know. Okay, I think okay, Dariga is here. Hi, Dariga. Okay. JavaScript. JavaScript is a high-level programming language, which is the first one. What does it mean high level? It means you don't care about the backside of the language. So if you use some functions, and many of them already implemented, and you can use just calling the function name. Dynamic. What is a dynamic? Dynamic means it's like a Python language, as you know from the previous subjects. In the Python language, to run your code, you use the interpreter to run each line. On JavaScript, we have the same mechanism. And dynamic means all our variables can be assigned to any variable, like in Python. And a little bit later, we'll see the examples. So the dynamic type, which we already discussed. So if you create some variable and assign it to the integer, it becomes as an integer. And after that, if you change the value of that variable to the string, it becomes as a string, which called dynamic type. And as you know, JavaScript runs your code using the interpreter. How can we run JavaScript code on our laptop? So one of the options here is opening the browser and opening the console, here, if you open the inspect table, inspect menu here, and you can go to the console tab, and after that, here we'll have the interpreter, which we have for writing the JavaScript code. Anything which you want to test using a JavaScript, you can write over here. And if you want to save your changes or save your code in some files, you can create also a file. So let's open. So have examples 21. So make the week number 3. And here open the code without any separating by the groups. Inside of the week number 3, we will have the file index HTML. It's about HTML. We already know that we have here head tag, and we would have here body tag, and so on. Okay. How can we run the JavaScript code? One of the options here is after installing the node, which is a core of the JavaScript. After installing the node, you can run just command from the command line. You can run the command called the node, and after that, it will open the interpreter, which is for the JavaScript. It's the same thing like a Python interpreter. For instance, here we have the type of A. So here we have the type of A, as we can see here, A equals to 2. We created a new variable which is a name is A without any data type, which means all the variables inside of the JavaScript, they are basically, and they are at the beginning, they are created as an object. After that, after assigning some value, depending on your value, it will change the type of the variable. So here we can see that the A currently it is a number. If we change somehow here, A equals to hello, which means A becomes as a hello, and after that, if you run the type of A, it will show the string. And it's the same thing like a Python language. So any objects, any variables created as an object, and while you are running your lines line by line, it will dynamically change the data type of your variables. Okay, it's the second option where you can write your code. For instance, here you have the first option. It's the same thing. For instance, type of A, which is number. It's the same interpreter as in our terminal, which is locally created. So exit. So how can we exit here? Okay. Here we have from the command line. You can, as we know that we already installed the Node version. I have here 12.12 version in my laptop, and you can check the latest version of the Node, and you have to install to your computer to run the interpreter like so. Okay. So we have here our HTML file. Let's run this file using our live server. Where is our browser? Let's go here. So let's close this one. Add our browser here and open the console here. So we have only one file here, HTML, index.html. You already seen the tutorials from the JavaScript, but how can we add the JavaScript code inside of the HTML file? So one of the options here is just writing a script tag and you can write your JavaScript code on inside of the script tag. For instance, console log hello JS. Let it be hello JS. So as you can see here, I'm writing inside of the HTML file, and without any. So let's add some hello JS. Hello JS here. As you can see here, we changed the h1 header. And it's recommended to add your JavaScript code at the bottom of the body. Why? Because while we are loading your page, it's recommended to load your JavaScript codes at the end of the body. So it's just best practices from adding the JavaScript codes. Okay, here I have the just a function called like printf or cout from the C++. It's just a console log and some message. It will log here, as you can see. It will log here to console. Let it be to console. And as you can see here, we have the message from our script, JavaScript code under the script tag. It's a second option, which is called inline. As you know from the CSS, you can write here, for instance, static. Oh, sorry, not static. It's style. Style, and write some h1 color red. Let it be. So as you can see here, we have the style tag, and we can write here CSS code for our elements. And like so, it's the same thing, but for JavaScript, you can write script tag and write your code inside of these opening and closing script tags. This is called the inline adding the JavaScript codes. So let's create a folder called static. It's just also the name of the folder. It doesn't matter. You can write your own folder name. Inside of the static, let it be a folder called CSS. And inside of the CSS static, let's create a folder which is called GS. So sorry, here we have one more folder, images. So why I'm creating a folder called static? Because as we can see here, we have HTML file inside of the root folder, and on the same level with the HTML file, I created this folder called static. And all the static data, for instance, images for your CSS files, for JavaScript files, they are all always will be the static. After finishing your code, it will be just without any changes. It should be somewhere stored. That's why basically it's recommended also to create a static folder. I mean the name of the folder, static or assets. In some cases, it might be different. So static folder can contain different other folders. For instance, all our static files we can store inside of the CSS folder. All our images we can store inside of this folder. And same thing for the GS folders, for instance, for JavaScript files. So let's create a file here. Let it be here A0, and extension should be, for the JavaScript files, extension should be gs.gs. And we created a new file. So let's create hello from GS file. So hello from GS file we added to our new created file A0.js. And how can we add or include this file to our HTML page? So as we can see here, we have only script tag without any. So we have here own code. Let's comment these lines and add new tag with the src attribute. So src, we know that it's a source. Inside of the source, we want to write the path to our GS file. The folder name is here static. Why I am starting from the static? Because HTML's index HTML file located on the same level with the static folder. That's why I can write like so. So the static, the next folder is GS, and inside of the GS we have the A0.js file. And if you save, it will reload, and as you can see here, we have the message from our file. So here I have our hello from JS file, and you can see here we added the new file which we created and added successfully to our web page. Okay, I think it's clear. Oh, really? So we have the 23 students. Okay. If you have questions, guys, please take a note, and we'll discuss about your questions at the end of the lecture. So I think you already started learning the JavaScript because we added the mini tutorial to the lab work, to your lab work, because the lab work was added to the Microsoft Teams on Thursday. That's why, before the lecture time, that's why we added the tutorial to do the lab work. So, okay. So I think adding the new file to our web page, it's clear. So go back to our slides. Okay, about the style guide, you can read under this link. I will upload this lecture to the platform. So the last thing is here interpreted, which means each line will be run one by one. Each line will be run one by one. And JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. So don't miss these two languages. So we have the programming language which called Java, and we have the JavaScript. JavaScript is a front-end programming language for adding the dynamic actions to our web page. So Java, it's a compiled different language. It's a completely different language, which is which doesn't have anything common with the JavaScript. That's why don't miss them. So regarding to the JavaScript, and we have currently, for nowadays, we have different stages and different versions of the JavaScript. So the last version and ECMAScript, and here we have the ECMAScript and the versions. ECMAScript is like a standard of the creation of the JavaScript. Starting from the 1997, which is when was created ECMAScript 1. And after that, it was developed and updated. And right now we have the ECMAScript 6, which was updated, and we have the new features which can do the same tasks which was done with the ECMAScript 1 more perfectly and more optimized versions. So that's why we have to understand about the ECMAScript 5. So basically the difference. Currently, we will compare the ECMAScript 5 and ECMAScript 6. Okay, data types. When we start learning any programming language, we have to understand the creation of some variables. So that's why let's start with the data types. So the data types, we have different data types here, but from our examples which we created, which we created inside of the terminal, we can say that, for instance, let it be a equals to 2, and log type of is that's just the name of the function, which will get one variable, and depending on the variable, it will identify the data type. For instance, here. So as you can see here, we have the number. It says a equals to number. So let it be not variable. Okay, let it be also variable. So a equals to true, which means Boolean. A equals to, for instance, some string. It becomes as a string, as you can see on the right side. So let it be, for instance, 2.4. It's also number. We don't have any difference between the 2 and 2.4 as the integer or the float. So we have one data type which is called number, and all the numbers, which is the negative, positive, real numbers, integer numbers, and so on, they all will be used as the numbers. So the other data types, for instance, objects. So here we have the object. So the function. We can function, which is also the data type as a function. So let's see the number, which is clear. It's just the numbers, real numbers, and so on. String, which is also clear, it's a sequence of characters. So the Boolean also clear. So Boolean is just true or false. So let's see here type of, for instance, 2, type of 2.4, which is also number on the right side. See here, let it be hello, which is our string. So let's create an object, so which is the object here. So ID equals to it's all object which contain only one key value element, and after that let's create a value called null. So we have inside of the JavaScript, we have different type of undeclared or undefined variables. So one of them is null. So as you can see here, null, it's just an object like this. And from this list, we have here null and undefined two types. So if you write here undefined, it's just variables without any assignings. For instance, let's create some variable. So this syntax is which is not correct, because we cannot create a variable without anything. If you want to create a variable without any assigning the value, you have to put here some identifiers. So about identifiers, we'll talk a little bit later. So here we have the data type of undefined, which is also undefined. So object we already seen. So we have one more data type, which is called symbols. So symbols, which is also less used, but was created as a ECMAScript 6 new data type. In some cases, it might be it can be used as a separate data type. So, and last data type, which is function. So the function is a keyword, as you can see from the highlight. Function is just a keyword for creating a new function. So we created new function, and without anything here. So as you can see, the curly brackets just opening and closing without any implement. So the description of the function. So it says we are creating an empty function, and it says the data type of this function is function, and that's it. So we have here definitely all the data types which we have inside of the JavaScript. So, okay, for creation of the variables, so the data types, I think it is clear. It's clear for creation. So what was here? Okay, so for creation of these data types, for any variables, we have different options. So let's open my notes here. So where is oh, here. Okay, let's open this checklist also. So what is JavaScript? We already finished it. So creation of the variables. So creation of the variables can be done using the three main ways. So first one is creating variables using the var keyword. Var and a. Let it be something like this. And let's create and okay, let's separate somehow from the previous examples. So we have here. So we created a variable. Var, it's just a keyword for creation of a variable without any data type. So we cannot write like integer or char or so on. It's just a var, which will be for any variable for any data type. For instance, you can create var equals to 2 or var a equals to hello, var a equals to true. It doesn't matter. So the keyword var, it's just for creation of the variables. So how can we create a variable without anything for initializing? For instance, a equals to 2, it's also valid syntax for creation of variable. If so, this variable will be created as a globally. So for creating a variable without any initializing data, for instance, leaving like so, this is not correctly syntaxes quote for the JavaScript. That's why you can use var a. It's also the correct version of creation of variable. So var a without any initializing data. And you can see here, every variable, when we created them, they will be assigned as an undefined value. So it means without any data. So it might be somehow integer, boolean, and other data types. But if you don't have any initializing value, it will become as the undefined, which is true. So the value of the a, if you create like so, the value will be the undefined. Okay. This is the first version and first option for creating a variables, which was before the ECMAScript 6. So as you know, we have the ECMAScript 5 and ECMAScript 6. So ECMAScript 6, it's just added new options for implementing some new things. So the creation of the variables using the var, which was come from the ECMAScript 5. So, okay. Which other options we have here? So we have two more options. The first one is creation of the variable using the let keyword. Let keyword, for instance, let it be b equals to 3, and just printing out the b. So we have in ECMAScript 6, we have creation of the variables using the keyword let. So the difference between these two and one more thing here will be, which is const variables. Const variable, for instance, let it be 4, and here we have this. So as you can see here, we printed the different variables and the creations. So the var is just the creation of the variable without anything, and you can also initialize it also here. So the let and var, they are almost the same, but the difference between them is inside of the inside of the scope, somehow scope, which we will discuss a little bit later. So the different scopes will be inside of these two creation of the variables. So the let variables, after finishing some scope, it will just delete this created variable, which is a local variable. But the var variables, which will be somehow created as a globally. So about the constant variables, you can try to reassign some the changes, and it says assignment to the constant variable, which is a type error. So after creating any constant value, you cannot change after this line, after creating this constant value. So you cannot change to the string and so on, anything. Const means it's a constant, short version for the constant, which is a keyword. So if you know that your variable will not change in the further lines after creation, you can, and you have to, and it's recommended to use a const value, which is more optimized than let and var. So the let and var can be changed. For instance, here we can have some changes for the var and let. They can be after creation, they can be changed to the different values. So here we have the true and the b. B also can be changed. So this is three types of creation of variables inside of the JavaScript, and the difference between them, and we discussed, and we will more discuss about it inside of the other sections here. Okay, I think it's clear. So let's move on and let's create another file, then rename, and which will be the okay. So inside of the HTML we included A0. That's why let's write inside of the A0. So A1 will be the first example, and inside of the A0 we'll continue. So we'll continue inside of the A1, which was the first example, and A0 it's just a example where we'll write new things. Okay, data types we already discussed. So here we saying about that if you know the languages like programming languages like C++ or C or Java, the JavaScript it's almost the same C. So the syntaxes, so they are almost the same. So as you can see here, the creation of the variables, so the doing some mathematical operations, arithmetical operations, writing the conditional blocks, so and ending with the semicolons, opening and closing blocks, and comments also are the same as these languages. That's why, as you know, C++ and you know the Python language from your previous subjects. So that's why the JavaScript language will not be difficult for you. So about the variable scoping. So what is a scope? Scope means variable, we know that what it is. Scope means, если по-другому, это часть кода, где мы можем обращаться к каким-то переменным. It's just a block of the code where we can just assign and get the values of any variable. So on the left side, you can see that we are creating a variable called global variable. And we create a function. We created a function, and inside of the function, we have its own variables. So for instance, var local variable and global variable as we created outside of the function, which is created as a global. We can compare and use it inside of the function. Why? Because we created it globally. And inside of the if block here, we are opening the curly brackets. It means it's just opening the new block. So block means if you see the curly brackets opening and closing, it means we have the new block. So inside of the new block, we created a variable called var2, which is equals to 2. But outside of the if block, you cannot access to the local variable 2. Why? Because this variable was created inside of the if block. And the local variable 2 located inside of the scope of the if block. That's why you cannot access to this variable. For instance, local variable 1, so without anyone. So local variable, which is accessible here, but local variable 2 cannot access. So the global and function, so here, let's see. Okay, we have the data conditions segments, okay. For creating a variable, so let's start for using the creation of the functions. So you can create a function, for instance, function using the keyword function, for instance, hi, log, hello, and that's it, for instance. And if you run this code, and you can see here the results of this variable. So here we want to create a variable called name. So name equals to student1. Let it be student1. And inside of the hi function, I want to log. So I want to. So let's. Sorry. I want to print out the value of the name, which was created here. Student name here. So what we are doing, so we created a variable called sname, which is equals to some string. We create a function. So creation of the function, I think it's also clear that the function is a keyword, name of the function, and we have without any arguments, and opening blocks of the function. So the description of the function. So we say that hello and student name. Student name is 1. As you can see here, we have the result. Okay. Now we want to. So we want to So let's create not string, but object. So object we have here. So for instance, name, which is student1, for instance, age, which is 20, let it be GPA, which is 3.9, let it be. So we have here object. Object, it's just a key value data. So we have three objects here. So the three elements inside of the S name object. So we have the console log shows somehow because it should be converted to the string, and it converted like so. That's why to print out the name, you have to call the name key, and it will print out the name of your object. And let it be if S name GPA is more than or equals to 4. We want to print out, so GPA should be key, else. So let's open our blocks. So let it be somehow student GPA less than 3.5. Let it be here more than 3.5. Okay. If we have somehow here 3.2, it says GPA is less than 3.5. If we have, for instance, 3.8, it says just a hello and someone. Okay, and we have some function, and we have the conditional statements here. As you can see, the conditional statements are the same syntaxes as in our C++ language. So the conditional operators also more than or not equal, also almost the same. So object, and for getting the value inside of the object, you can access them using the keys. So GPA, age, and name, they are the keys, and those values on the right side, they are the values. So as we created this variable as a global, we can access inside of the function. What we say that when we are creating a new function, we are creating a new scope. New scope here, new scope here, and new scope here. When we open the curly brackets, it means we want to create a new scope, new block. Otherwise, it would be not just a new block. And let's create here some value, variable. Let it be age, not age. It's just let it be a, which is equals to so s name. So the s name age. And if you log it inside of this block, it will show. So as you can see here, we have this printout that the age is 20. So if you copy this line and put it inside of the, for instance, high function, it will also call. As you can see here, a was created inside of the if block, and we are console log located inside of the high function, outside of the if and else block. And as you can see here, after printing out the name of the student, we have the number also. If you change it to the let value, it says a is not defined. And this is the difference between var and let creation of the variables. So if you create a var variable, it says it will create it inside of the if block, so the if block, but it will link to the previous parent object. So inside of the high, it will also will be available. Why this is not recommended way? Because after creation this variable inside of the if block, in some after some lines, if you want to create, for instance, let's create a variable a which is equals to true, and it says a is already been declared. So I don't know about this variable. So I don't know and I don't care about this variable, that the name of this variable was a and it was created inside of the if block. But after this several lines, I want to create new variable which called a using the let, but it says which is also already created. And if you write using the let, this variable, this creation of the variable will be exited, will be deleted after this symbol. So after this block, closing the curly brackets. So I think this is clear for these two types of the creation of the variables. So the var and let. So the let, which will be created inside of this scope, inside of this block, opening and closing brackets. Okay, I think this is also clear, and so let's move on. Move on and want to continue. So the time is okay. We have to be somehow the creation of the variables, data types. We already discussed the conditional statements. I think also clear. So the loops. For the loops, we'll have to somehow identify that creation of the arrays. For creating an array, so let it be let a, for instance, r. So I want to show one more thing here for the conditional statements. For conditional statements, we have, for instance, 2 more than 4. Let it be, which is false, more than equal or less than equal. It is also understandable for us. For instance, not equal. So the not equal, also the valid operators. And for checking the equality of these two variables, so they are not equal. For instance, if we have here 2, it will show the true on the right side. So if you have somehow here string, so we have here string and we have here number, and we are somehow checking the equality of these values, and it says true. Why? Because while this comparison operator tries to convert these two variables to the same data type. How do you think which data type should be converted? So on the right side we have the string, so on the left side we have the number. If you convert it to the the string, they becomes as the same numbers. So it depends on your task. If you want to just compare the values, so the content of the variables, you can use these two times equal sign to compare these two variables. If you try to compare the values or the content of the variables and data types, you have to put one more equal sign. What does it mean? It says it will try to identify the data types of these two variables. On the left side, we have the data type number. On the right side, we have the data type string. And after this filter, it will just return the false and it will show the false. To get it true for this operator, you have to get almost the same data type and the same content. And only in those cases, it will return the true. And I think it's also clear. So let's put it here somehow. Okay. So what we have to do, so the creation of the letter, so the arrays. So arrays, as we know, can be created using the square brackets. For instance, let it be 2 for, that's enough. So the creation of the numbers of the array of numbers. So we created a variable a, which is data type is object. In some cases, it's just an array. So how can we loop inside of this array. So we know about the for loop, we know about the while loop from our previous programming language skills. So let's see. The first one is for loop. So the for loop, and we have to somehow create a iterator. So we can create iterator, for instance, using the I equals to 0, I less than a. Inside of the a, as we know, it's an array. We have the attribute called length, which returns the number of elements inside of this array. So the I++ and log. So the log we want to array. So that we somehow here, or so the array I. So what is the problem? So it's not array, it's just a, isn't it? Okay. So as you can see here, we just printed out one by one all the values of our array. So it's our first option. And after that, if you want to just print out I, it says for. How? The question is how. So we not created any I variable here. It's a problem of this creation. So when we are creating the new for loop, we created our iterator like a var value. So the var means it will become as a global variable. That's why inside of this for, we can access, after this for, we can access to the I value, which is equals to 4. So the 0, 1, 2, 3. It's a last step, last iteration, and after that I becomes as a 4. And in that case, the for loop will be finished. And that's why I shows at the 4. So if you change it to the let, it says I is not defined. Why? Because this I variable was created inside of this block. And after finishing this block, it will be deleted. It will be removed from our scope, from the list of the variables. So that's why it's also recommended to use the let value inside of the, in any cases when we have some variables which might be changed. So if you put here, for instance, const, it will also say error because here we are changing the value of the I. But constant values cannot be changed. That's why const also will be the incorrect version. That's why the let is best option. Okay. Okay. So let's comment these lines. It's the first option for the looping inside of the array. So the second one is also for, let's create let I of a. This syntax says without any indexes, so the v, let it be v, without any indexes, array here, so array here. Okay, it says for loop and without any iterators like so, without any indexes, let v becomes as each value from this list, from this array. So of keyword means this array should be one by one passed to this variable, and as you can see here, we have the results. And without any length, without any indexes, and so on. It depends on you which type you want to use. So it's the second option. The third one is, for instance, you can use using your array, name of the array, and we have here for each function. For the array, we have the for each function, which will take the one function as an argument. And v will be just each value, for instance, log v. And as you can see here, the result. So how it works? To our array, I'm running so I'm calling the function called for each, and for each function, this for each function will take only one argument. One argument should be the function, new created function. That's why I'm creating a function without any name, and this function will take one argument. One argument, it's a same thing like in the of keyword. So inside of this array will be one by one passed to this variable. It's the same thing. So from this array, it will be one by one called this function and pass it each value here. And that's why inside of the function, I'm just printing out to the console. And last thing is here the while loop. So while loop, it's also the let I equals to 0 while array while I is less than array length log array I and I plus plus. So I plus plus. So as you can see here, we have some problems because we before the incrementing the I value, it starts working, and that's why it just. So we have to immediately close this tab. Okay. Close this tab because it will take more space and more resources from our laptop. If your JavaScript code will not finish something, it's just a problem. So let it be 5. So 5. I think that's it. Okay. Okay, as you can see here, the creation of the iterator I equals to 0, I while the less than the length, we want to print out the elements of the array and we want to increment the value. So $1. Okay. So which was the last option? So we have also do while loop. I think it's also the clear because they are almost the same. Okay, where is the notepad? So the looping arrays. So for the arrays, let's see the functions. So we have here such like an array. So let's open this type of the printing of the array. So for array, we have the function called push, which is just a function to add a new value to the end of our array. So it means we want to add to the end of our array. And we have function called pop, which will delete last element from this array. So which will delete last element, and I think it will also print out deleted element. So identified. Oh, okay, new length. It will return the new length of the array. Okay, so push will be will add a new element to the end of the array, and pop will be just remove it. And as you know, array length is just a number of. Let's close this. So it's just a number of elements inside of the array. So in our case, we added and removed this element. From this array, we have only one. So we have only 4 elements here. Okay, the index of. So the index of also the useful function. So to identify the index of some value, for instance, you can pass here some value and it will try to identify the index of that value. For instance, if it's a value we cannot find inside of the array, it will just become false. It will just return the false or the -1. So as you can see here, we don't have any variable like this. That's why it will become as a -1. If it's 43, it becomes as a 2, which is 0, 1, 2. So we have other functions called other functions, useful built-in functions for the arrays. And I think about that you can read by yourself. So the find, sort, so let it be the find, sort also. So array find, you can read about these functions if you click this button. It says, so what is the description? So find index, find. So it will try to find the value inside of the I think so. The find function, no, we take the function, for instance, b, and f. So for firstly print out. So it's a tomorrow. So if our value equals to, for instance, to some number, we want to print out pi only one time, and in that case you can use this find function and sort, slice, splice. For instance, slicing and splicing, it's just the same thing. Like in our Python, for instance, we have three steps. It's a starting point, it's an ending point, it's a step. Inside of the Python, we can do such like a slicing. Inside of the array also, we can do the same things. For instance, array, slice, starting from 2, and let's be 4. Let it be 4 log array, and here we have the new variable and b. So the slice function, it will just create a new function from the original one using your indexes. So we say that starting from 2 until the 4, we want to take those variables and create a new array. And new array is stored inside of the b value. As you can see here, these two values from the original one copied to the new variable, which is slice. You can do the same thing, but you can do the splice function, for instance. Splice, it's just removing the elements inside of the array. For instance, 2, 2, and 2. What does it mean? 2 and 2 means starting from the second index, we want to remove 2 elements. If you put one element, starting from the second index, we want to remove only one element. So the 0, 1, 2. So this 33 will be removed because we have here splice 1. And as you can see, the new this original array will be changed if you use the splice function. But for the slice function, it will just create a new variable without any changes for the original function. Original array. So the map filter reduce also the examples. For instance, for mapping, map function will change the values of the elements. For instance, you can return, for instance, +5 for each value. And after that, let's create here C. Let's create C. So the map function, which will also loop inside of your array, and it will return one by one each new created value. For instance, it will take the first element at 5 and return as the first element of the new array. So as you can see here, we have the 16, 27, and 48 as the new elements of the array. So the map is also a useful function for changing the array data. So filter and reduce. So the filter, let's immediately see. So let's filter our C array. Filter, it's just also function. We'll take the variables, and inside of the function, we want to return For instance, let it be more than 20. Let's create an ABCD, and log D. So inside of the filter, it's the same thing as a map. It will just loop over your array. So our array is right now it's a C, which is this array. So we want to filter this array using this condition. So it says if this condition returns true, that value will be taken for the new array. If it's false, it will be just skip it. So as you can see here, from this array, only 16 will return the false. 16 cannot be greater than 20. That's why it will return the false, and 16 was removed for the new array. It's our filter function. So the reduce function. So the reduce, by the name it says, so let it be also for the C array. So reduce function will take two arguments. The first one is function with two values. For instance, let it be sum and value. It will loop over your array, and it will create the initialized value and each value as previous functions. And inside of the reduce function, you can write sum plus v. First argument inside of the function, which is an accumulator. In our case, it's just a new created variable before looping. So for the initial value for that variable, you can pass over here as a second argument. So initial value, as you can see here, it says the previous one is a function, which will take the two arguments, previous value, and the current index. And the second argument is the initial value. For the initial value, let's put 0. And it says sum initially will be equals to 0. And every time sum will be added the each value. And after that, so let's create s equals to something which was returned from the reduce function. And you can print out s, which is a sum of these three numbers. So 16, 27, and 49. If you add these three numbers, it returns 92. So the reduce function will reduce all the elements of the array to the one value. Okay, I think it's clear, and all the other things you can do by yourself. So the functions. So we have, okay. I think we can continue in just a second. Okay. I think we have to continue in the next file. So rename it to the number 3, and we'll continue inside of the, again, inside of the 0. So the function. So regarding to the function, we have two types of the creation of the functions. So the first one is function declaration. Second one is function expression. What does it mean? For instance, for creating of the function, you always have to use a function keyword. Function hello, as in our previous example. For instance, this type of creation of the function called function declaration. We are declaring the function. So we are declaring the function name of the function hello, and it will just or greeting. Let it be greeting, and it will just print out hello. If you call the greeting function, it will print out hello. And so we have different type of So it's a first type of declaration of the function, which is function declaration. Function declaration. The second one is function expression. When we are saying about the function expression, it means we can create a function, create a variable. Let it be also greeting, but 2. And we can assign as a value to the variable some function. Hello 2. So as you can see here, the first one is just function declaration. So we are declaring that we have such like a function and it should be implemented like so. And after calling, we can see the result. On the second example says we want to create a variable. So variable called greeting2. And the value of this variable in some cases and in previous examples, we assign it like this. For instance, let something equals to some number. But in this case, we want to save inside of the variable, not number, but function. As you can see, function. And it's also valid for the JavaScript. So inside of the variable, we can store the definition of the function. And this type of creation of the function is called function expression. If you call the greeting2, and it will also work like this. And this is 2 types of the creation of the functions. So the function declaration expression, so we have to assign to the variables. So the next type of creation of the function, which is the arrow functions, which comes to us from the ECMAScript 6, ES6. So let's create a function called sum or square. It can take one argument, and it will return the a multiplied by a. So this syntax is called arrow function. For instance, you can call your function, pass there some value and log it. If you run like this, it says that it is 16. If it's 3, it is 9. So we created a function. So if you call the type of square, it says function. So this is example for the arrow function. So the syntax is for the let some value, it's the name of the function, somehow equal sign, and inside of the parentheses you have to pass your arguments. In our case, we have one argument, and that's why this parenthesis also can be removed. It is also valid syntaxes if you have only one argument. So one argument, and this symbol says this symbol says the returning part. So if you have only one line inside of the function, you can write inside this line immediately, and it will be returned. So if you, for instance, create function sum or square here, and let it be value and return v multiplied by v. If it is just a function declaration like this, function declaration square function should be, so the square function should be implemented like this. For instance, v it's an argument and we returned v multiplied by v. So let's put it here to compare it with the arrow function. So this syntaxes and this syntaxes, they are the same. So this is converted at the end after compiling. It will convert it to this function, to this type, and will be to do the same thing. So that this part will be returned like this. Okay, let's see another example. For instance, sum. So let's write the sum of 2 numbers, a and b, and we want to write this type of function. So the sum 2 for 3 and 7. So 3 and 4, the result is 7. And as you can see here, we have the two arguments here. And in this case, if you have more than one argument, you have to put parentheses in that case. But if you have only one argument, it can be valid without any parentheses. And that's why if you have one more, so the more than one argument, you have to put parentheses, and this parentheses becomes as arguments to your functions. So we are calling the function and we are passing the arguments, and these arguments will be inside of this function. So the right part, it's just a returning part. What if we have the several lines inside of the arrow function? Let it be sum2, or multiply 2, multiply, let it be a and b, this sign. And if you want, you can also open your block, which means block of your function. So the description of your function like this. So let's create a let c equals to a multiplied by b and return c. If you have more than one line, if you have more than one line inside of the array function, you have to implicitly write the returning part as in always inside of the other functions. But if you have only one line, which should be somehow returned, you can write like this syntaxes. But if you have different lines, so we have the two line here, in that case, if you leave like this, it will not work. For instance, if you let it be a multiplied by b, which is not a working example for the multiplying function. So it cannot be returned. So that's why if you open the brackets, curly brackets, in that case, you have to write the returning part. Okay, the arrow functions, the property of an object. Okay, property of an object. Let's see the example. So the example is here, student from the previous one. Student, let's create an object. So the ID is, let it be 2021. So the 2020 BD and something. So the name is S name. The S name will be the student one, and that's enough, I think. And we have a function. We have function inside of the object. So we showed here creation of the functions for function expression, function declaration, and so on, the arrow functions. And one more thing here is when we have some object, inside of the object, we can create the object level functions. For instance, the show, it's just a key of the student object, and show can be also function. For instance, lock ID, but in that case, ID is not. So ID is not accessible. For instance, if you run student and call the function show, it says ID is not defined. So this ID cannot be gathered. In that case, as we know that this is only one object, in other words, it's just a one class, and we have properties here. For the ID is property, S name is also property, and show also property. But show, it's just a method. So that's why this in this case you have to access to this value using this keyword. This means this object, and this will link to the attributes or the parameters of the current class or current object. This ID, as you can see, it will print it out. So let's show the string buildings for this symbol. So as you can see here, we have the such like symbols. It's a not single quotas. It's a back single quotas. So in that case, you can write, for instance, you can write ID plus space plus this S name, and it will show something like this. For instance, something like this. So let's be like this. Okay, but this is also, we have better option here. For instance, let's comment this line. We have better option here for the string buildings, which is a back single quotes, and using the $sign, you can write this ID, $, square curly brackets, this as name, and this is the same thing as before, but without any addings, without any spaces and so on. Just writing just describing your string. So this will be changed with the value of the ID, and this part will be changed with the name of the student, and we have such like a output. So 20. Okay. Okay, I think this is enough for the functions, so that's why we have to go on, move on. So it will be number 4. It will be number 4, and we'll continue inside of the 0. Okay, as property scope, global and function scope we already discussed. So if we create a variable inside of the function, and if we create using the let variable, these variables can be seen inside of the only blocks. So what about our presentation? Okay, using prototypes. So about the prototypes here. So about the functional, for instance, map function, which will also can be used like this. The function, so the arrow function can be used inside of the map. Okay, we can continue here. So we can continue about the hoisting. Hoisting, what does it mean, hoisting inside of the JavaScript? Let's see. For instance, look A. It says A is not defined. So we know that A equals to, for instance, 2, and it will show the 2. It's over the best case or the understandable case, and A equals to 2, and it will just print out A. What if we put it after the console log? It says A cannot access A before initializing. If we have the let variable, if we have the var variable, it says undefined without any errors. As you can see here, we are console log, we are want to print out variable A, but before this line number 3, we don't have any variable called A, but we have variable after the console log, and it says undefined. And this code says we cannot, so we can access to the variables which located on the same scope without any sequences. So if you put over here, it will print out 2. If you put after the console log, it will print out undefined. Why? Because this code will be converted to this code. Var A, log A, and after that A equals to 2. So that these commented lines will be implemented for this code. Console log A, while running your JavaScript code, it will go through from your file and see all the variables. For instance, var A equals to 2. Why this part is not created? Because for the scope, it should be just the names of the variables can be hosted. What does it mean, hosted? It means they will be available in any stage of your code. Even if you have here, for instance, var b equals to hello, you can write here console log b, sorry, B without any errors. It says undefined. Why? Because before these lines implemented, JavaScript sees all the variable names without any values, only variable names saved inside of our JavaScript file. And after that, it will be converted to this line. So let's remove these two options. The same thing for the functions. For instance, console log sum 2 and 4. We don't have any function here. If you create a function called sum, which will take the two arguments and returning the sum of these two numbers, and it says the result. But if you put this number over here, it says also 6. Why? And you see, console log sum 2 and 4. But the sum function before the line 11, we don't have any sum function here. But sum function located at the bottom of the after the console. What does it mean? It means JavaScript while running your file A0, it will just look through all the variables inside of this file. For instance, A, it's a variable. So the function sum, it's also variable. Sum, it's just the name of the function, it's also variable. So the function declarations in our case also will be available for the calling. So after that, if you call it, it will it knows about the sum function because this part save it inside of the JavaScript code, and this is called the hoisting. And I think about this you can also read at your home because we have limited time here, 25 minutes. Okay, about the callbacks. What does it mean? Okay. Okay. So let's create a function called f1. So the log, let it be f1. F1 shows. So the f1, it says f1 show. Okay, let's create another function f2, which is also will print out f2 function. And let's call it f2 also. Okay, we have two functions. So f1 and f2, we want to call them one by one, step by step. So f1, it says, and f2, and here we have it. Let's comment these lines. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's comment these lines. And we have two function printouts here. So we have, so I think it's clear. We have two types of function. The first one is set timeout. The second one is set interval. We have two types of the functions which will work as a with the times, with the limits, or with the delays inside of the JavaScript. For instance, set timeout means we can add some delay for doing some actions. Set interval means do something, adding some interval. For instance, show. So let's function show. So let I equals to 0. So log I plus plus. So we have here a variable I, which is started from 0, and the show function, which will just print out the value, and it will increment the value of I. So we want to use set interval function. It takes two arguments. The first one is function. The second one is delay. So how many times it will add between the calling this function. So we want to call the show function and add 1 second every time. And as you can see here, 0, 1, 2, and adding every 1000 milliseconds, it means 1 second, it will call this function. This function will just print out I and increment it by one. And then, as you can see here on the right side, set interval can do the such like a tasks. Okay, we have the second one, which is set timeout. Set timeout means you can call the function and add some timeout here. For instance, 4. And if you run it, and you can see here the result only after 4 seconds. So if you reload this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, and here we have result. So it will show the 0 because we have the initial value is 0. It will just add delay to the function, to this function. Okay, I think this is clear. So we'll go back to our previous examples, F1 and F2. What we want to do here. So we want to add set timeout inside of the F1 function. Set timeout, the first argument, which was the function. So let's create a function immediately here. The function, and inside of the function, we want to print out this message, and we want to add, let it be 1 second or 2 seconds. And as you can see here, even we are calling the F1 at first and F2 at the second. It says F2 function. It means this message was shown. And after that, it will show the F1 function. Why? Because F1 will do something, the complex, let it be complex task, and it will delay for this 2 seconds, and it will finish after 2 seconds everything, and it will print out this message. And if you run it again, F2 will be immediately shown because this function is called. But F1, as located before the F2, the message of the F1 showed here. So this is our question. How can we do, why we have such like a problem? So such like a problem occurs because the F1 will do something little bit, will take the more time than the F2. That's why even we have the F1 call before the F2, it shows after this. And in that case, what we can do? In that case, we can pass the arguments inside of the F1, which is, for the understandable, we can name it like callback. Callback is just a variable, it's just an argument. This callback, in our case, will be the function. So inside of the JavaScript, you can pass the functions as the arguments. So the callback, it's a function. So let's callback function will be implemented after the F1. So after finishing, after printing out this F1, we want to call this passed value. So in that case, let's remove this one, and F2 function, which should be implemented after the F1, I want to pass as argument. And as you can see here, it will delay, it will wait 2 seconds, and after that it will finish implementing F1 first, and after that it will call the callback function. In our case, callback is the F2, and F2 will be implemented. Say it again. Okay, it will wait for the 2 seconds, and after that it means F1 is finished working or start doing something, and after that we want to call back. We want to call the passed function. So the callback is just a name. You can name it as you can. It's just your option. But for understandable, for the explaining what does it mean, this is we are saying that we have to implement F1, and after finishing F1, let's call back and finish F2 after this. In that case, you can do such like a syntax. Okay, the callback functions, which is also the key point inside of the JavaScript. I think it's also clear. Okay, So we have how many times? Okay. Just a second. Okay, I think it's enough, and we can move on and create a new file. Let's rename it to the file and remove the 0. Okay, starting from this example, we somehow finished the JavaScript basics for the language itself. So now, starting from this example, we want to implement it. How can we use this language, this JavaScript language, in our web page? So we know that inside of the web page, we have the HTML file, and we have the such like a syntaxes. Okay. Okay, let's continue with our slides. So programming ECMAScript 6, which can allow us to arrow functions. So we have the JavaScript object notation. So which means any JavaScript object. Well, let it be as or object a. Let it be a 1, 2. Number. Let it be hello. Let's see, true. So we have such like an object. This object can be converted to the string and convert it back. In that case, we have JavaScript object notation variable, which is JSON, as noted the JSON, which we already discussed from the previous examples. So any object which contain any data type can be converted to the string. So using the JSON function. So JSON, we have the stringify function inside of the JSON object. JSON object, which is already exists inside of the JavaScript. And if you pass here some variable, you can see the string part of this object. So this object can be converted to the string. As you can see here, we have the string object here. And type of s, so let s equals to this converted value, and type of s also will be the string. If you have the string of object, you can also parse it like to the object. For instance, this s, it's our string. Let it be b, which is a JSON parse from s. In that case, if you print out b, so b, it will print out the object from the string which was parsed from this converted string. So this we have the two-way conversion of any object. Okay, I think we can copy it to the last example. So let's copy it over here. Okay, some JavaScript items. So inside of this slide, we are saying that we have some technical tricks. So the host name, for instance, variable host name equals to host name or on what located on the right side. What does it mean? What this symbol can do when we assigning some value? It means host name equals to host name if host name is exist. If it's null or undefined or nothing, in that case, we want to assign value to the host name as a local host. The same thing for the port. So if someone port and hostname, which is optional arguments to our functions, they can pass or they can leave it. So if we have arguments with some value, in that case, we want to assign it. If hostname was skipped, in that case, we want to use a local host. And that's it. This is just a default value in assigning a default value. So it's just the name of the trick. So the second one is access a possible undefined object property. So we know that for instance, for this value, so let's copy it back. For this value, for instance, if you run a equals to ASD, it says undefined. So it cannot be get it from the a value, the attribute called ASD, because we don't have any such like a variable. In that case, you can, or for instance, let it be AID. It says 1, 2, 3. But before this, let's undefine the a value. It says if a is undefined, a ID says cannot read property ID of undefined. It says undefined, we have the undefined value, and undefined cannot be getted ID value from that. In that cases, you can do the such like properties. For instance, let it p equals to a and like in our example here, and a ID. And p will be over here. So in that case, this AND sign, AND operator, so Boolean operator, means this part says a should be something but not undefined. If so, we want to do this right side. We want to get the right side example. So the num, it means so if you comment this line, it will take the num value. For instance, ID, it will take the ID value if a is not undefined. If somehow a becomes as an undefined, in that case, without any errors, we have p as an undefined value. So it means this symbol says the both of them should be true. So on the left side, we are checking like a not equal to undefined. So if so, we want to create variable and assign it ID. So these two lines can be converted like this. This part and white part, it's the same thing, and as adding the block if inside of this file. So let's comment this line. Okay, so starting from this slide, we are talking about the DOM. What does it mean? Document Object Model. If you write inside of the terminal, what does it mean, DOM? DOM means we have here objects called document. If you run it, if you open this document, it says all the things which you have inside of the HTML file, it save it inside of the JavaScript as a document object. This document, for instance, document object can be accessible inside of the JavaScript, and document object stores all your HTML and all the content of your HTML file. So here we have on the left side, we have the index file. So on the right side, we have the object document. So document object model, for any HTML file, we have the nodes and we have the attributes. So those attributes can be manipulated using the JavaScript. So DOM hierarchy. So what does it mean, DOM hierarchy? So we have here, for instance, we have here the HTML, which is a root node, root tag. And after that, we have the two nodes. So from the HTML, we have the two childs. The first one is head, the second one is the body. Inside of the body, we have the so we have two tags, two childs here. The first one is h1, the second one is script. And like this, we have the hierarchy of the HTML page. So root of these documents, we have the window document, or so we have the window object here. If you see the window object, it will store all the needed values, all the needed options, all the needed functions, which belongs to this web page. And one of them is window document. Window document is the same thing as we've seen before. Document will be the same thing. Okay, inside of the window document, as we said about the hierarchy, we can see that the document head, it will return the head part of the document. For instance, here we have the head part, document head, and for instance, document body. If you run this code, it will return the body part. And for instance, let it be body and what we have here, h1. So h1, it's just an object, and that's it. So like this, you can access to the nodes of your elements of the web page. For instance, window body and so on. So we have inside of the DOM objects have tons, for instance, of properties, and so we have here window object, which have different functions, different variables, and different events which can be occurred inside of the web page. Inside of the web page, and we have the most of them are private, which means you cannot access to that functions to manipulate and so on. So accessing to the nodes, what does it mean? So starting from the document body first child. So let's write inside of the JavaScript. Let's start from the document body first child. Let A, and it says text, and it says text. So let's create inside of the body so let's create class box. For instance, button 1. Okay, starting from, as you can see, we are writing inside of the JavaScript file the document, which is also the root object, which can be accessible inside of the JavaScript, and the body. For instance, if you take this document body and store it inside of the variable, and as you can see here, we have the such like elements, so such like as content of this variable. So document body says this HTML text, this HTML hierarchy can be stored inside of the A. So our task is, so let's create and let's write something inside of the box. For instance, inside of the box, we want to add some text. So how can we do that? For instance, box located inside of the body. It's the first thing. It's a body located inside of the HTML. And we can do it like passing and for the first child, and going to the next element and going to the childs and do the same thing more times. But if we have the 100 of hierarchies, 100 of levels inside of the HTML text, in that case, such like syntaxes cannot be implemented fastly. That's why this is not recommended way for working inside of the DOM hierarchy. For instance, you can body first child, and the next element also first child, next element first child, next element first child, and that's it. And that, like so, you can do it. You can get the needed element from the HTML. So to get elements inside of the HTML, for instance, to this box element, you can do different type of selectors. So one of them is get element by ID inside of the document. Inside of the document, we have different type of functions. For instance, get element, and you can see here the different options. So get element by ID, get element by class name, get element by tag. For instance, let's get element by tag name or by name, get element by tag name, and let it be h1. And as you can see here, h1 we have inside of the body. So we have here h1. We're saying that inside of the document, it means inside of our page, we want to find all the elements, all the text, which is h1. And as you can see here, we have the one object. So the one, this get element by tag name will return the array of objects. So if you have here two h1s, it will return the two objects. As you can see here, two objects. If you have the three h1s, it will return all of them. As you can see here, we have the three elements inside of the array. So, okay, it's the first option. The second one, let's comment it. The other options get element by ID. So if you have ID, this button should be, let it be like ID. If you know the ID of the element, in that case, you can get it using the ID. So as you can see here, we want to get element by ID btn, and we have such like ID, and this tag should be stored inside of this variable. And as you can see here, we have this and such like action. The same thing you can do it by get element by class name. So let it be box. And as you can see here, we have the also array of elements. If you have, for instance, several boxes, it will return then several objects inside of the array. So we know that this class name and tag name, they will return the arrays. So arrays, even if we have the only one variable. So get element by ID will return only one object. Why? Because we cannot write two IDs for the different tags. Okay. What else? So by name, by tag name, by and so on, and before the get elements, we have here query selectors. Query selector means the syntax is like in our CSS files. So inside of the CSS, how can we add CSS, for instance, for the box? If we see that it is class, we say class box. Or inside of the body tag, we have the class box. Or inside of the HTML, we have class box. Or if we have only one box, or if we want to get all the box classes inside of the anything, we can write like this. So it's this one also will be asset. So this type of the selectors says we want to find inside of the document any element with class box. If you add here class box, in that case it will return only first accurate element, because we can use this hierarchy. For instance, if this box located on the as a first child of the body, and this one is as a second child, you can do it, and you can separate it by divs, and you can use query selectors to get such like inputs. Okay, this is how can we access to the elements on inside of the HTML page. So how can we manipulate with these elements? For instance, we have attribute called inner HTML. Inner HTML, it's the attribute for the selected object, and you can put anything, for instance, hello message. Hello message, and let's see inspect the page. For instance, here we have the box. Inside of the index, we don't have any text here. And inside of the result, we have the hello message. Hello message added using the inner HTML attribute of the div tag. First, we take this div using this selector, and using the inner HTML, we pass it some message to that element. So like so, you can manipulate with the using the other attributes, using the other things inside of the JavaScript. For instance, you can add style. So style, let it be color equal to red. Color equal to red. For instance, what else? Font size equal to 20 pixels. Or 25 pixels, let it be 25 pixels. A style. So font weight will be the bold. So not red, let it be blue. What else? For instance, anything, any styles which we can add using the CSS, you can do it inside of the JavaScript also. For instance, inside of the CSS, we are writing like font size, but all the attributes inside of the CSS, which consists of different, so the several words in the JavaScript, they become as a capital letter, camel case attributes for font size, font weight, and so on. For instance, and other things. So let's do it for the btn also. For instance, document query selector. We want to get class btn. So log btn, and let's open the console. And here we have the so we don't have any class in the btn. So we have ID. So if it's ID, you know that if it should be just sharp sign. And as you can see here, so let's comment this console. And as you can see here, so that we got the btn, this button. So this button we got inside of the JavaScript. And using this button, you can write also styles. For instance, background color or background. Let's check it. So the background, so yellow. So okay. So btn style, font size, also 25 pixel. Okay. Border. Okay, border. Let it be solid, 3 pixels, and green. 4 pixels, 5 pixels. Radius 5 pixels. Padding, let it be from the bottom, from the top and bottom, let it be 10. From the left and right, let it be 40 pixel. And like so, we have here button, which can be changed. All the actions, all the styles can be changed also using the JavaScript also. Okay, I think it's clear for now, and we want to move on. So we can access to the HTML elements using the JavaScript, and we can do any actions using the functions. For instance, Okay, so the DOM element selector methods, changing styles, creating a new element. So creating a new element. So let's create a new element. For instance, text. So the document create element. Create element. For instance, we know that we have the paragraph element. So let it be h3 element. So the text is our element, created variable inside of the JavaScript. So the inner HTML. So let it be new created h3 from GS. So the text of our new created element, but we don't have any message here. And after that, let's okay, it's enough. And this variable, it's just a new created variable. We don't have any h3 inside of the HTML. So we can add this. Let's add container here and copy all the things inside of the container. So okay, we have the container class here, and inside of the container we have all the objects. And what we want to do is we created h3, and let's get the container also here. Container, it's our document query selector, which is class called container. Inside of the container, we want to container append child. Append child, and we want to append the text. And as you can see here, new created object from the JavaScript, which is a h3 object, which is a text also set it from the JavaScript, and container, which is also our root object here. To the root object, which is also get it from the JavaScript, we added a new child, appended a new child, which should be added to the end of the selected tag. The container append child and text was added to the JavaScript. But inside of the HTML, we don't have such like input. Like so, you can create your own, not own. It's just dynamic tags using the JavaScript also. Okay, the creating the new elements also clear. So the time is up. Let's do the last things. So we have the last examples from slides. Okay, the class name. So the text content and inner HTML, the get attribute, set attribute from, for instance, if we have from the button, for instance, data ID. So for instance, data ID equals to 123. So this attribute, which was added to the button, you can access to this attribute using the, for instance, where is the button? So here we have the button. So let's log btn get attribute, and you can pass data ID. And as you can see here, we can access to this attribute values using the function called get attribute. But the same thing, you can do this for the set attribute. For instance, btn set attribute data ID and 111. If you open the inspect, and as you can see here, data ID becomes as a 111, but in our HTML we have the 123. So using these two functions, get attribute and set attribute, you can access to any data from the node. So regarding to the styles, we already discussed. So the changing the node structure, so appending the child, we already also discussed. So the more DOM operators, so the window location, if you, for instance, if you write here, if you write the window location, so not local search, location, Window location says about all the needed data which regards to this web page. So this local host name, its support, and so on separately. One of them is one of these options is window location and h reference. H reference means this link. If you change this H reference, for instance, to the Google and hit enter, it will redirect it to the Google. It means using this as variable, which is window location and href. You can assign it to any data, so any resource, and this web page will be redirected to that web page after assigning it to the. For instance, here we have the next page. So the console log, which is this console log function, which we start using immediately starting from the JavaScript, which is also located inside of the document object model functions. So the alert and confirm. So what does it mean, alert? For instance, alert some message. If you save it, the alert, it's a function which will just show some message from the developer to inform the user with the something. For instance, this text was passed here, which will also just clicking the OK. So we have confirmation message, for instance, agree. So agree, for instance, this text will be shown depending on the result from the user action, for instance, OK or cancel. You can do the different type of actions depending on the result of this confirm. You have to store it inside of the variable, and you can check if it's OK or if it is cancelled. So the last one is prompt. Prompt means enter your, for instance, your name. And in that case, we have the input inside of the message. For instance, you can enter it, and after pressing the enter or OK variable, it will store the value. And let's write it inside of this. So sorry. After entering, you can see that we have here the message from the from the prompt message. So anything you can enter it, you can ask from the user, and after entering it, after clicking to the OK button, this value will be passed as a returning one, and you can do it. You can do with the this returned value something. Okay. So the DOM coordinate systems. So DOM coordinate systems means the location of the any element inside of the DOM can be accessed using the different type of attributes. The different of them in this graph, you can see that 0, 0, it's a top left corner. So here I have the 0, 0. To the right side, X will be increased. To the bottom side, the Y will be increased. For instance, let's see again with the button. So the BTN offset, so so for the BTN, we have for any element, not only for BTN, for any element, we have different type of attributes. For instance, for offset top, for the div number 2 will be this distance. Offset left will be the distance. And offset parent, which is a parent offset from the parent offset space from the parent. And we have here the hierarchy of the 3 elements, div1, div2, and div3. And offset width and offset height also will be the length, for instance, offset top, which is for this button from the top located for the 95 offset. Let it be left. It should be this distance, as you can see here, for 8 pixels. And the same thing, and you can identify the location of any element using these syntaxes, using these variables, depending on your task. Okay, so events. So it's the last thing what I want to show you. So the last thing is here, for instance, okay. So we created here H3. So we have button element here. Regarding to the events, so inside of the web page, you can be done any different events, million of events. For instance, when I'm moving my mouse, it's also event. We know about the events of the mouse. For instance, mouse, moving mouse, enter mouse, leave, and so on. For instance, when our mouse located on the button, it's also can be accessed as an event, and so on. For instance, when I'm clicking to the button, it can be also added as an event. For instance, btn add event listener. We have different type of event handlings. For instance, you can do it. Let's show it again. You can do it inside of the HTML. For instance, click. So on click. On click, it's just an attribute of the button. So button tag here. Show. Let it be just show. So show, it's just a name of the function. What we can do. So when we are clicking to the button, we want to call the function show. Function show, and let it be I plus plus, and let I equals to 0. And that's it. If you click to this button again and again, it will just increment the value of I. As you can see, it will occur when I'm clicking to this button, it will run this code. It will handle this event named click, and it will run this code. So they'll run this function. It's the first option. How can we bind our events with the elements? Second one is, so we can leave it as is. Second one is using the btn add event listener. It's a function called for any element. You can call this function add event listener, and add event listener will have the two options. The first one is name of the event. In our case, it's a click. The second one is function itself. It means what we have to do when someone clicks to this button. It's a function. In our case, we can just call show. And if you click this button, it will do the same thing. So if you don't have this button here, you can write immediately here new function and call, or for instance, alert something. Alert something when button was clicked. For instance, I'm clicking to this button and it says alert again, and again. Okay, it depends on you. If you have already declared your function, you can pass the name of the function here, for instance, like this. If you don't have creation of the function, you can write it by yourself immediately. Okay. For today, so let's see our. Okay, in this slides we can see that the events, so the mouse movement, button click, enter, leave, and so on. For instance, events from the keyboard when someone clicks to any pressing button and so on. Focusing, entering the, for instance, if we have the So if we have here input, for instance, input class display, for instance, after filling something for while I am changing, it's also event. When I'm pressing to the button after filling these inputs, how can we get this value? It's also the task of the JavaScript. So input form submitting is also the event from the JavaScript. So event handling, the what happens, the event of the interest. So what happens? Event of the interest, it means when I'm clicking to this button can be, this button will try to identify the functions which should be called when this event will occur. So what to do, JavaScript is invoked when the event occurs on the element. So when in this event, this btn, it's our this button. Btn, this btn is our button, and after clicking, we want to do this action. And so we have here two options. So on clicking, so you can add this event to any tag, not only for buttons. For instance, for divs, for images, for anything, you can add this type of event. For instance, if someone clicks to the hello, you can do something, using this function, or you can do it by, if you already created the function, like in our example here, show, you can do it like btn on click equals to show, and that's it. It's also will be the binding button event with your created function. Okay, time event we already showed. So the set timeout, set interval, we already discussed about it, and that's it for today. Okay, so we event listener, inline events, and add event listener. So I think today's lecture will be useful for your lab work, because in your lab work you have to implement the to-do list with all actions, which was discussed which was added inside of the general. We have the course notes. Inside of the course notes, we already have the link to the week number 3. So it means a lab JavaScript task for your next lab, which is a tutorial here, and this task. It means you have to create this page with the input and some button, and I'm entering some value here, and after clicking this button, this should be added to this list with all the actions. So adding new item, marking as a done. When I'm clicking to the checkbox, it should be marked as a done, and to cross-check a text and so on, and deleting also. Okay, so for now, do you have any questions? So do you give us some extra time for lab 3? So extra time. So for different number of students we have in different time during the week. For instance, some of them will have the practice lesson on Wednesday, and starting from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we have the such like practice lessons. So we have to discuss with our teachers regarding to the deadlines, because even we have only one day. So today we have the one day missed from the lecture time. So a lecture should be discussed only today, not yesterday. I think it is not critical, and I will discuss with our teachers. If we somehow decide to give the extra times, I will announce in the general channel. Okay, any other questions, guys?
How many points do you give for each lab?
So about the labs, so I think I will announce, I will print all the lab separations with your practice lesson teachers. So overall, we know that all the lab works, we have 10 lab works. Overall, we have the 20 points as at total. So it means approximately each lab work equals to 2 points. But we have the easy lab works and we have the complex lab works. It depends on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So let's stop our recording.